Oh, good morning or afternoon. I don't know which it is by now. It is afternoon. Cars of Oak Ridge. Myra asked me to speak on our continuing series of The Prophet in You. She wanted to hear about post-biblical prophets during the Dark Ages, which I had thought about looking into, and I did. And there's some interesting individuals that are listed throughout that period of history. And the first one I'm going to address is, several of them are saints. They've been sainted. This one is Saint Palladius of Embrun. He is a 6th century a bishop. And one source states, now in this time frame, you're not going to get a lot of real specifics, but they just say what they thought and what kind of went on about him. So, and some are specific. We'll see here in just a little bit. But it's said of Saint Palladius that he possessed an exceptional efficacy in obtaining whatever he petitioned God for. He was a prayer. He had a strong prayer. If he prayed it, it happened. And many miracles were attributed to him. And besides the gift of prophecy, he enjoyed, quote, a mystical familiarity with angels. He apparently interacted with angels. And he successfully defeated the machinations of the devil simply by making the sign of the cross. So it sounds like this man was walking in power and spirit. Now there's an interesting story about him that I thought was amusing. I wanted to include. It says in Catalonia, he is known as Patulari. According to a legend associated with his relics, some Benedictine monks decided to go to Embrun and steal Palladius' relics to take them with them to Spain. Once they were in possession of the relics, the monks placed them in a container, which was carried by a donkey. When the travelers reached the outskirts of town of Camprondon, the animal refused to travel any longer and did not move. The monks tried to get the donkey to budge, but the animal refused. It stamped its feet against the ground. Miraculously, 3 springs of water gushed out from the ground where the donkey had stamped its feet. The monks let the donkey go free. The animal wandered into town, passing the churches, and came to Santa Maria, entering the monastery of St. Pierre, where it remained. The monks decided to leave the relics in Camp Rondon after all.
Balaam's donkey.
So God used another donkey. He said, "No, you're not going to get to take them." Oh, that's pretty funny. Okay. The next one is Saint Columba. Now, this is a very good story. Who's the doctor down in Zion? Dr. Oh, I can't think of his name. Huh? No, who does all the teaching? Robert Heidler. Wrote a series of novels about the island of Iona. And what triggered him to do that was because he went to the island of Iona. And this is the place where Saint Columba lived. And much went on there, which we're going to read about here. This time frame, his life was from December the 7th, 521 until June the 9th, 597. So he lived to be 76 years old. He was an Irish abbot and a missionary evangelist credited with spreading Christianity in what is today Scotland at the start of the I need your help, Shelby. Hiberno Scottish mission. He founded the important abbey on Iona, which became a dominant religious and political institution in that region for centuries. He's the patron saint of Derry. He was highly regarded by both the Gaels of Dalraita and the Picts, and is remembered today as a Catholic saint and one of the 12 apostles of Ireland. Now, the curious thing is, he was sainted by the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church didn't come along until later on in his life. Let's see, I'm thinking, is that right? No? Okay. Well, we'll read on here. Maybe confusing him with the other saint. Columbus studied under some of Ireland's most prominent church figures and founded several monasteries in the country. Around 563 AD, he and his 12 companions crossed the Dunaverty near Southland, Argyll, and the Kintyre before settling into Iona, Scotland, then part of the Ulster kingdom of Dalriada, where they founded a new abbey as a base for spreading Celtic Christianity among the pagan northern Pictish kingdoms. He remained active in Irish politics, but he spent most of the remainder of his life in Scotland. 3 surviving early medieval Latin hymns may have been attributed to him. Now, what happened to Columba? He had a friend, his name was Finian, and they got in a quarrel over a quote-unquote Psalter, which is a book of Psalms. I don't know what that argument was about exactly, but they got in a fuss over it, and friends joined each side, and they actually went into a conflict. And it's called the Battle of Call Drahemer in Cabray, and many people got killed over this disagreement.
Wow.
Okay? But as a result of this conflict, Columba departed and settled in Iona, where he established the monastery for missionaries. And these missionaries were sent throughout England and Europe, and many souls were saved. He is credited with performing many miracles. He is one of the 3 named saints of Ireland. He felt so repentant and so his conscience bothered him so much over this conflict that he felt like he had to do something to make up for it. And so God got a hold of him, and he went and established. And their missionaries went out all throughout, not only Scotland, but into Europe. And many, thousands upon thousands of people were saved as a result of it. And it went on for a long time, even after he died.
What was the time period?
In the 500s.
500s.
Yeah. Okay. The next individual is Saint Malachy. And his time frame was from 1094 to 1148, the 1100s. He is another Irish saint and Archbishop of Armagh, and to whom was attributed several miracles, and supposedly he wrote an apocryphal book about the popes, the lineage of popes that were going to come in the future. He's native-born Irish and was formally canonized and made a saint. His brother, Gilchrist Fua McGear, was later became bishop and Christian Clogger in the 1100s again. So it's not a whole lot about him, but he's attributed as being prophetic in some form or fashion, and he's one of the 3 Irish saints.
Were they Catholic?
Yes, they were at this point in time.
Right.
Okay. The next one is James Salamoni. He was an Italian Catholic priest and a professed member of the Order of Preachers. He was a noted ascetic known for being prone to ecstatic states on a frequent basis. Ecstatic. Remember how we used that word before? Talking about...
Probably.
Huh?
Prophets.
Yeah.
Manifestation, yeah.
An ecstatic state.
This is in Italy. Where did you say it was? Doesn't say.
He's Italian, yes. Giacomo Salamoni. That's how he's... Giacomo Salamoni.
Solomon.
His name's James of Salamoni.
That's peace.
Okay.
Shalom, it is the word peace.
Solomon. Probably Italian spelling for Solomon.
Yeah.
Okay. He was born in 1231 in the Republic of Venice to the noble Salomon family. I wonder if he was Jewish. One of the oldest patrician houses in Venice. His mother raised him after his father died, though his mother later became a Cistercian nun, at which stage his maternal grandmother raised him. He became a Dominican in 1248 and became the prior of houses at several places such as Baeza and San Severino, as well as Ravenna. But Forli was where he settled for the remainder of his life. He gained fame for healing as well as for his prophetic abilities obtained through his ecstatic state.
Wow.
In 1269, he lived in the Dominican convent of Forli and was called the Father of the Poor. He also earned fame for being a person who received the confession of Carino al-Balsamo, a murderer of the Peter of Verona, and became the spiritual director. Okay, now we got to bring a woman on the scene here. Who would be a woman in this time frame, Myron?
Mother Teresa.
Huh?
Don't know.
Joan of Arc.
Oh.
I knew that.
Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's done Joan of Arc before.
Yeah. This is from 1412 to 1431. And Joan of Arc is a patron saint of France, honored as the defender of the French nation for her role in the siege of Orleans and her insistence on the coronation of Charles VII of France during the 100 Years' War. Claiming to be acting under divine guidance, she became a military leader who transcended gender roles and gained recognition as the savior of France. Joan was born to a property peasant family from Domremy in the northeast France. In 1428, she requested to be taken to Charles, later testifying that she was guided by visions from the Archangel Michael, St. Margaret, and St. Catherine to help him save France from English domination. Convinced of her devotion and purity, Charles sent Joan, who was about 17 years old, to the siege in Orleans as part of the relief army. She arrived at the city in April 1429, wielding her banner and bringing hope to the demoralized French army. 9 days after her arrival, the English abandoned the siege. Joan encouraged the French to aggressively pursue the English during the Lorry campaign, which culminated in another decisive victory at Patay, opening the way for the French army to advance on Reims, unopposed, where Charles was crowned as King of France, with Joan at his side. These victories were boosted French morale, paving the way for their final triumph in the 100 Years' War, several decades later. Now, after Charles's coronation, Joan participated in an unsuccessful siege of Paris, September 1429, and the failed siege of La Charite in November. Her role in these defeats reduced the court's faith in her. In 1430, Joan organized a company of volunteers to relieve Compiègne, which had been sieged by the Burgundians, French allies of the English. She was captured by the Burgundian troops on 23rd of May. After trying unsuccessfully to escape, she was handed to the English in November. She was put on trial by Bishop Pierre Cochon on accusations of heresy, which including blaspheming by wearing men's clothes, acting upon visions that were quote-unquote demonic, and refusing to submit her words and deeds to the judgment of the church. She was declared guilty and burned at the stake on May 30th, 1431, at the age of 19 years old. Now listen to this. In 1456, an inquisitorial court reinvestigated Joan's trial and overturned the verdict, declaring that, quote, tainted by deceit and procedural errors. Have we seen anything like that today?
That's exactly what's happening today.
Investigations tainted by deceit and procedural errors?
Oh my gosh.
Are we seeing any of that today?
Yes.
Stuff tainted by deceit. Impeachments. Tainted. Not tainted, they were totally complete deceit and violated so many normal procedures. Joan has been revered as a martyr and viewed as an obedient daughter of the Roman Catholic Church, an early feminist and a symbol of freedom and independence. After the French Revolution, she became a national symbol of France. In 1920, Joan of Arc was canonized by the Roman Catholic Church, and 2 years later was declared one of the patron saints of France. She is portrayed by numerous cultural works, including literature, music, paintings, and sculptures and theater.
Mercy.
Yeah. Now we're going to 1510 to 1571. Justus Velsius. Justus Velsius, Hagenus, or Just Wellens in Dutch. After 1581, was a Dutch humanist, physician, and mathematician. Velsius started his career as a highly respected professor in the liberal arts in Leuven, Strasbourg, and Cologne. Later on, he portrayed himself as a prophet and promoted his own particular view of Christianity, outlined in the pamphlet Christiani Omnius Norma, which he wrote in London. He came into conflict with civil and ecclesiastical authorities all over Europe and spent his final years as a preacher and faith healer in his native Holland. While in Cologne, Velsius was married to Beatrix van Steenhoven, and later on in Groningen to Crete Kassen. He is noted because he debated John Calvin and was a believer in free will. He opposed John Calvin. So that's why he was looked upon as being different, because he opposed the main theologian of the day, which we suffer from still from to this day, Calvinism. But he opposed it. He's noted as a faith healer and prophetic. Do you think John Calvin might have had something against that and kicked up a little dust over that?
For sure.
Absolutely.
What faith follows Calvin?
Baptists.
Well, some Baptists.
Large, conservative Baptists, like the guy next door, is eat up with Calvinism.
Conservative, you're using the wrong word. Traditional Baptists, maybe.
Well, their theology is called Reformed theology.
Oh yeah, okay, Reform. That's
Reformed
probably-
theology. Church
Yeah.
I grew up in, that pastors eat up with Reformed theology. I didn't know what it was at the time. I do now.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Judaism. They have
Yeah,
Reformed Judaism.
they would rather follow the doctrines of a man than
Right,
the words that
right.
Jesus said.
Which is negates it.
I often have thought this. I'd love to go back in time, knowing all that I know now.
Sure.
1968,
But you can't.
and
Yeah.
sit down with my pastor,
Yeah.
and I'd have him so mad.
Yeah. But see, that was for you to learn from, not to follow.
He'd be so red,
That's
he'd
true.
be beat
You
red in the
needed
face.
to learn that.
Huh?
though. You needed that.
Yes.
For later on to have another.
But he would be beat red in his face, and smoke would be coming out of his ears.
Don't make anybody upset now.
Okay, moving right along. Our next person is Eleanor Davis. This is in the 1600s. By the way, I'm going through these. These are not all in time order. Okay, it has to do with their way they're listed alphabetically. Okay. Eleanor Davis, the fifth daughter of George Tuckett, 11th Baron Audrey. She was learned in Latin, theology, and law. In 1609, she married Sir John Davis, by whom she had 3 children. In 1625, she began caring for George Carr, a 13-year-old Scottish boy who was deaf-mute. While living with Davis, he began to utter prophecies, and on the 28th of July, 1625, Davis herself began prophesying.
Wow. The deaf and mute child began to prophesy?
Yes.
Mm.
The same year she published her first pamphlet, A Warning to the Dragon and All His Angels, which related to the book of Daniel to contemporary political events.
I'm gonna read that.
John Davis disliked Davis's prophesying and burned at least one of her manuscripts. That's her husband.
Mm.
Scholar Diane Watt recounts that she responded by dressing in widow's weeds and predicting that he would die in less than 3 years. One day in December on the following year, she began to weep uncontrollably during dinner, and 3 days later, her husband died.
Wow.
And she said it was going to happen, and it did.
Mm.
If someone prophesies something, and it happens,
Mm.
what do we call them?
Prophets.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Mm.
now we're getting to the grand finale. Can anybody guess who might be the grand finale?
Billy Graham.
No, we're in the Dark Ages.
Oh, Dark Ages.
Between- Between
Martin Luther.
70 AD and 1571. 1571 is Martin Luther,
Mm.
but he ends the Dark Ages. From there forward, it's the
Back up.
what do we call it? That period, the Reformation of the Church. Yeah, the Reformation age. Okay. Now we're still in the Dark Ages.
Mm.
Things are rough, but there's a really cool dude here. He's the third Irish saint.
St. Patrick.
Hey! Ding ding! Okay, we're back in the 1400s. This is St. Patrick, was the 5th century Romano-British Christian missionary and bishop in Ireland. Known as the Apostle of Ireland, he is the primary patron saint of Ireland, and other patron saints being Brigid El Kildare and Columba. Patrick was never formally canonized, having lived before the current laws of the Catholic Church in these matters. See, he's called a Saint Patrick, right, of the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church didn't come along until 200 years after he died in England.
Wow.
And he would have had nothing to do with the Catholic Church.
Mm.
Nothing. When the Catholics came 200 years after he died, they came and met with the followers of Patrick who were still there in Ireland, and they forced them to start adopting Catholic ways. They didn't celebrate Easter. They celebrated the feasts.
The feast days.
They feast days.
Wow.
They celebrated them.
Yeah.
Everything that we talk about and everything the Jews do,
Everything-
the 3 main
right.
feasts, that's what they did. And they did Resurrection Day for Christ. Nothing about Easter eggs and bunny rabbits. But the Catholics came in and forced it on them. And brought them into line and
Mm.
made them in. And everything that they had going on fizzled out.
Mm.
And they had it going on. Signs, wonders, miracles.
Wow.
Everything was rocking. Okay? Nevertheless, he is venerated as saint of the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, the Church of Ireland, and an Eastern Orthodox Church, where he is regarded as equal to the apostles and enlightener of Ireland. I think he must have done a few things. Get all these titles stuck on him. According to Patrick's autobiographical confessio, when he was about 16, he was he's not Irish, by the way. He's not Catholic, and he's not Irish.
Mm.
He was captured by Irish pirates from his home in Britain and taken as a slave to Ireland. He writes that he lived there for 6 years as an animal herder before escaping and returning to his family. After becoming a cleric, he returned to spread Christianity in northern and western Ireland. In later life, he served as a bishop, but little is known about where he worked. By the 7th century, he had already come to be revered as a patron saint of Ireland. By the 7th century, just a couple hundred years later, he was locked in as a saint. According to the Confession of St. Patrick, at the age of 16, he was captured by a group of Irish pirates from the family of Villa in Bannerbean, Tabernet. They took him to Ireland, where he was enslaved, captive for 6 years. Patrick writes in the Confession that time he spent in the captivity was critical to his spiritual development. He explains that the Lord had mercy on his youth and ignorance and afforded him the opportunity to be forgiven of his sins and convert to Christianity. So he suffered this captivity. Then he came home, became a Christian, and had such a love for Ireland, he went back. Okay? Said after 6 years of captivity, he heard a voice telling him they would soon go home, and that his ship was ready. Fleeing his master, he traveled to a port 200 miles away, where he found the ship and with difficulty persuaded the captain to take him. After 3 days sailing, they landed presumably in Britain, and apparently all left the ship, walking 28 days in the wilderness and becoming faint from hunger. Patrick's account of his escape from slavery and return home to Britain is recounted in his declaration. After Patrick prayed for sustenance, they encountered a herd of wild boar. Since this was shortly after Patrick had urged them to put on their faith in God, his prestige in the group was greatly increased. After various adventures, he returned home to his family. Now in his early 20s, after returning to Britain, Patrick continued to study Christianity. Patrick recounts that he had a vision a few years later after returning home. I saw a man coming, as it were, from Ireland. His name was Victorious. He carried many letters, and he gave me one of them. I read the heading, "The Voice of the Irish." As I began the letter, I imagined in that moment that I heard a voice of those very people who were near the wood of Falkland, which is beside the western sea, and they cried out as with one voice, "We appeal to you, holy servant boy, to come and walk among us."
It's beautiful.
And Patrick went back to Ireland. He engaged with all the Druids, and with the power of the Holy Spirit, he wrecked them. He overcame them with the power of God, performing many signs and wonders and miracles, and led all of Ireland to Christianity. And they had a powerful ministry going on. Powerful. And most people, all they know about St. Patrick is this little guy, and they salute him by drinking green beer. St. Patty's Day.
Or they wear green.
Huh?
They wear
we
green.
green.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they wear green. Yeah, you gotta wear green on St. Patrick's Day. That's what all we know about, most people know about, is just it's a day to celebrate. The fact of the
Right.
matter is, St. Patrick was a powerful man of God.
Evangelized the whole country, right?
Yes. And he really needs to be revered for what he truly was. And so
Thank you.
that's our conclusion today of a brief look at the Dark Ages, that no matter what the devil tries to do to shut it down, there was a constant thread of things God was doing throughout this time period and later in the period of Reformation. And so all these folks are regarded, and we look at them as being prophets and hope that they would help you to come to understand how that you can be prophetic also, the prophet in you.